everyone and welcome to ATGC of Genetics. Today we'll be understanding the ATGC of Huntington's disease. So let's quickly look at what all we'll be going through in this video. We'll first be discussing the introduction, just to get to know a little bit more about this disease. Then we'll go on to understand the inheritance of the Huntington gene. As you might know, Huntington's disease is a genetic disease, and the gene causing this disease is the Huntington gene, which you might inherit from your parents. So we'll be understanding how this gene is passed on in your family. Then we'll be understanding the pathogenesis of the disease, the symptoms, the diagnosis, and the treatment. So let's start off with discussing the introduction. Also, just a quick fact that May is Huntington's Disease Awareness Month. So if you are here in the month of May, that's amazing that you took the step to know a bit more about Huntington's disease, and it would be great if you could spread the word about it a little bit more. So Huntington's disease is a neurodegenerative disease. The disease usually starts to develop by the age of 30 to 40 years. And in some cases, that is approximately 10% of the cases of this disease, it might develop below the age of 20. And in this case, it's called juvenile Huntington's disease. So let's now understand what's neurodegeneration. This word comes from the accumulation of two separate terms. The first being neuro, which means brain, and the second being degeneration, which means progressive damage. So in Huntington's disease, you might observe progressive damage to the brain cells. It will be more clearer from this picture right here. As you can see, in the normal brain section, I would like you to focus on this particular region right here. And then if you compare it with the brain section of a patient suffering from Huntington's disease, you might observe a big hollow region here. And this hollowness is caused by the death of neural cells in that region. So basically in Huntington's disease, the gene which we inherit affects the brain and causes death of neural cells in certain parts of it. Let's also look at the worldwide prevalence of HD around the globe as well. So across most of the continents, you would observe that there are approximately 4.5 to 5.5 cases of HD per 1 lakh people. But in East Asia, you would observe that in most of the countries, you would find approximately 0.4 frequency of cases of HD per 1 lakh people. So it's as low in East Asia and it's very high in South America. And here you would observe approximately 700 cases per 1 lakh people. So let's now understand the pathogenesis of Huntington's disease. Pathogenesis is simply understanding how the gene affects our body and how HD is developed inside our body. So to understand this, it's important for us to understand DNA, which is our genetic material. As HD is a genetic disease, our DNA plays a vital role in its development. So you can imagine DNA as a necklace of pearls. So the thread right here can be assumed as the backbone of DNA, and the pearls can be assumed as the bases which are on our DNA. And these bases are A, T, G, and C, which are adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. Also, the DNA inside our body is not as small as this necklace right here. In fact, if we stretch it out, it could go to the moon and come back to the earth 6,000 times. Alright, also please note that the sequence of bases is very specific inside our body, and the sequence plays a very vital role for production of each and every protein in our body. So just to understand DNA a bit more, here's a quick illustration. So you can see that the bases are arranged in a specific order. Like there's A, C, G, T, G, G, C, A, C, and the bases go on and on. So alright, And as you see the circle right here, this could represent a gene. So a gene is basically a specific part on a DNA which is responsible for producing a specific protein in our body. So let's just assume that the second circle right here is the Huntington gene. So let's zoom right into it. So if we look into and zoom the Huntington gene more, we'll see that there are bases in specific orientation and specific sequence. And as you can see that there are CAG triplet repeats right here. So there's CAG, CAG, CAG. CAG is basically present in a repeated form. And these repeats in the normal Huntington gene are about 27 to 35 times. But in case of mutated Huntington gene, which is the gene causing HD, you would observe these CAG repeats again, but here the number increases and is 40 to 60 times. And then again in juvenile Huntington's disease case, if you zoom into the gene, we'll again find these CAG repeats, but here the number increases even further and goes to 80 to 100 times. So as you can see that the number of times CAG is repeated in all these cases goes on increasing. And we can also hypothesize it in this way that as the number of CAG repeats increase in the Huntington gene, the symptoms for HD develop faster. So just to summarize, here you can see the chromosome 4 of a body, and if we zoom into it, we'll find our DNA on which lies the HD gene, and if we zoom right into it again, we'll see these CAG repeats on the gene. And these CAG repeats are responsible for coding for the amino acid glutamine. So as you can see, these CAG repeats then code for a big glutamine chain. So in normal cases, there should be approximately 27 to 35 glutamine in the protein formed, but in Huntington's disease, there's an abnormal increase in the glutamine number. So the exact mechanism how this protein affects the brain is not yet known, but it's definitely known that it is toxic for our brain and causes the death of neurocells in specific parts of the brain. Alright, so let's understand the inheritance of the Huntington gene, just how you might inherit it or how it is passed on in one's family. So the Huntington gene exhibit autosomal dominance. So let's now understand what is autosomal dominance. So it will be clearer from this picture right here. As you can see that the father here is affected from HD and the mother is unaffected, which means that the father carries the mutated Huntington gene and the mother does not. So this Huntington gene, which is the mutated gene, can be passed on to any of their children, right? So just for a fact that every child inherits one chromosome from the father and one chromosome from the mother. So it's just a random process that the child might inherit the mutated gene or might inherit the normal gene from the father. And as there is no mutated gene, there are just two normal genes from the mother's side. The child will be inheriting any one of those genes, and that doesn't make a difference. So as you can see from the picture right here, that the first child, which is a daughter, inherits the mutated gene from the father and inherits any one of the normal genes from the mother. The second child, which is a son, inherits a normal gene from the father and any one of those genes from the mother. The same is seen in the case of the third child, and in the case of the fourth child, he again inherits the mutated gene from his father and any one of the normal genes from his mother. So as you can see from the diagram that the first and the fourth child who inherited the mutated gene are affected and will be developing HD in later courses of their lives. So it's clear from this fact that only one gene, only the one mutated gene is sufficient to cause the disease in the child, and it makes it certain that the child will be developing the disease in later course of his life. And the second gene, the normal gene you taken from their mother, does not matter at all, because the mutated gene right here asserts dominance over the normal gene. So this is mean when we say that HD gene shows autosomal dominance, because when it is inherited, it dominates the second gene, and if it's present, it will definitely develop disease. Let's now look into the symptoms observed in HD. So there are majorly three categories of symptoms observed. The first being behavioral. So in this, you will observe the patient showing aggression and exhibiting antisocial behavior. The second category is of movement. So you would see the patient exhibiting clumsiness, he or she would have difficulty in swallowing, and they would also exhibit jerky, involuntary movements. And the third category is cognition. So here the person might exhibit lack of concentration, he or she might experience insomnia and depression. It's important to note that the symptoms might vary for each and every case of HD. So let's now look into the diagnosis of Huntington's disease. Diagnosis is basically a method of making sure the person has that disease or not. So for HD, there are basically three major types of diagnostic methods. The first is by studying the family history. So as you know that HD is a genetic disease, and the gene causing it can be inherited from your parents. So it's important to understand how the gene might have entered your family, and it's also important if you want to find out what is the probability of you passing the Huntington gene to your child. And a genetic counselor is the perfect professional medical help who can guide you and help you understand this. The second diagnostic method is via psychological assessment. So as we saw earlier, most of the symptoms of HD are psychological in nature. So definitely these assessments helps a lot in diagnosing HD. And the third method, and the most reliable one, is of genetic testing. So in genetic testing, basically from the patient or the suspect, blood is drawn, and through that the DNA is obtained of that person. The DNA is then studied further to find out how many CAG repeats that person has. So if the CAG repeats are more than 35, then it's made sure that yes, the person would develop HD in later courses of his life. So let's now look at the treatment available for HD. Sadly, as of now, there is no cure available for HD. But yes, there are certain ways in which you can help the person with the symptoms. The first method is via drugs, the second being physiotherapy, and the third being occupational therapy. So that brings us to the end of the video. I hope this video is informative for you all, and if you have any questions, any queries, please feel free to reach out in the comment section below, or else you can also contact me in the details provided in the screen. Thank you, and if you'll be interested in learning about more genetic diseases and disorders, please do subscribe to my channel. Thank you.